Okay, what if I told you that one of the fiercest, most feared military units in modern history was made up entirely of women? Well, today, that's exactly what we're diving into, the incredible story of the Dahomey Amazons, the only all-female army of their kind on record. Just imagine this for a second. It's the late 1800s in West Africa. On one side, you've got the French army, kitted out with the latest weaponry, backed by this massive colonial empire. And on the other side, a unit of African warriors, armed with rifles and swords, ready to charge. But here's the thing. They are all women. So who were these women, really? And how did this elite fighting force, which was built up over centuries, find itself in this final, desperate showdown against a global superpower? Let's get into it. First things first, let's talk about who they were. You know, Westerners called them Amazons, thinking of the Greek myths. But that's not what they called themselves. Oh no, they had their own names, and they were powerful. They were the Minone. In their language, that means our mothers. They were this absolutely elite regiment from the Kingdom of Dahomey, which is in modern-day Benin. And get this, for more than 200 years, they were one of the most respected and feared fighting forces on the entire continent. So how does an all-female army even happen? Well, the story of the Minos isn't simple. It's a story of evolution, of pure necessity, and honestly, the sheer will to survive in a really violent and rapidly changing world. What's so wild is that this army didn't just pop up out of nowhere. You can actually trace their evolution over 2 whole centuries. It all started back in the 17th century with a group of female elephant hunters called the Beidou. Then Queen Hongbae took this huge step and created a formal female bodyguard. By 1727, they were already proving themselves in major battles. But it was really King Gezo in the 1800s who took all that and turned them into the military powerhouse they became. And why did this happen? Well, it came down to brutal, stark necessity. The Kingdom of Dahomey was constantly at war. And that, combined with the devastating transatlantic slave trade, which, you have to understand, both drained their population and fueled their economy, meant they had a serious shortage of men. The kings of Dahomey needed soldiers, and they looked to the other half of their population to fill the ranks. Joining the Mino wasn't just like signing up for the army. No, it meant you were entering an entirely new world. It came with a unique status, a whole new culture, and a life that was completely separate from every other woman in Dahomey. So while they called themselves our mothers, their official title was Ahosi, which means king's wives. They were all technically legally married to the king, though most of them never actually shared his bed. This status made them untouchable. They were almost sacred. No one else could lay a hand on them, and they lived in the king's palace, totally separate from the rest of society. And here's the incredible trade-off. In exchange for giving up a normal family life, the perks were huge. We're talking high status, great wealth, and real power. They could actually rise to positions of command. They even had a major voice in the Grand Council where they could help shape the kingdom's policies. I mean, that's a level of influence that was pretty much unheard of for women anywhere in the world at that time. To become a minnow, you had to go through a complete mental transformation. Just listen to this line from one of their war chants from 1851. As the blacksmith takes an iron bar and by fire changes its fashion, so have we changed our nature. We are no longer women, we are men. This wasn't a job. It was a total reinvention of who they were. And that reinvention was forged in a seriously brutal training program. We're talking intense physical conditioning, survival skills, and military drills where they had to storm defenses made of sharp acacia thorns. And most chillingly, they were sometimes forced to execute prisoners. This was a calculated method to desensitize them to pain and death. Discipline was everything. All of this training, all of this history and culture, it was all about to be put to the ultimate test. Because in the late 19th century, the Mandinga came face to face with a powerful new enemy, the French colonial army. And the difference in technology was just stark. The Meccano had a mix of weapons, some Winchester rifles, older muskets, and their traditional swords and clubs. The French, meanwhile, had superior modern weapons, longer bayonets for close combat, and these highly disciplined units like the Foreign Legion. It was a serious mismatch. The result was absolutely devastating. In just one battle, at Adagon on October 6, 1892, the Dahomey army was just shattered. This number you see here, 417, that's how many Mino were killed that day. the French lost 6 soldiers. Just 6. The Mino charged straight into superior firepower and they were nearly wiped out. But even in defeat, their bravery was legendary. I mean, the French soldiers who fought against them wrote about their incredible courage and audacity. They were completely blown away by the ferocity of these women who would just charge head-on into a storm of bullets, fighting to the very last breath. The French victory spelled the end of the Kingdom of Dahomey and the end of the Mino as a fighting force. But their story didn't end there. Their legacy is still echoing today. So in 1894, the regiment was officially disbanded. The last known survivor, a woman named Nawi, who said she fought the French, she lived all the way until 1979, passing away at over 100 years old. And just recently, in 2022, their memory was set in stone, or, well, bronze, with this massive statue unveiled in Cotonou as a tribute to their history. But for the women who actually survived the wars, life after was incredibly difficult. Historians who've tracked their lives found that many of them really struggled. I mean, think about it. They had been warriors, commanders, political advisors. And then, stripped of all that status and purpose, many just couldn't find a place for themselves in a world that was no longer theirs. And yet, their story is probably more visible right now than it's ever been. If you've seen Black Panther, the Dora Milaje are directly inspired by the Minoan. The movie The Woman King brought their story to a huge global audience. They've shown up in video games, novels, plays. They've really cemented their place in our modern culture. When you look at these images, the actual photographs of these warriors right next to the drawings made by Europeans who are just in awe of them, you're seeing the real faces of history. These were not myths. They were real women, part of this complex, formidable fighting force with a rich and, ultimately, a tragic history. Which brings us to a really challenging question. See, the Mino weren't simple heroes. They were defenders of their kingdom against a colonial invasion, sure, but they were also elite soldiers in a kingdom that was enriched by the slave trade. So when we watch their stories on the big screen today, how does knowing that full, complicated reality, all their courage, and all their brutality, change how we see their legacy?